the mechanisms for fat loss. Okay, so we're going to be going over the principles around fat loss. This is going to get a little bit scientific, but hopefully that you can take away a lot from this. Okay, so a lot of us want to lose weight, we want to lose fat, and we always ask ourselves how, right? And so the main mechanism for fat loss is what we call a calorie deficit. A calorie deficit is eating less than your body requires so that you're in a calorie deficit, and by being in a calorie deficit, you are eating less than your body requires to perform all of its normal functions in a day, right? And so, for example, if you need 2,000 calories to live, to function, and including your TDEE, which will be in the next video. TDEE is total daily energy expenditure. Including all that, if you required 2,000 calories a day and you were eating 1,500 calories a day, you would inevitably lose 1 pound of fat per week. Although because you're eating less, your weight loss will probably be greater than 1 pound a week, because with less food, less volume, less mass in your stomach and gut, you will weigh less collectively, including the fat and the food that you are eating less of. Now, in order to create a calorie deficit, there's a lot of different tactics and strategies. A tactic could be switching out higher calorie food for a lower calorie food. So, for example, if you like normal tortillas, they're around 110 to 140 calories for a bigger size, not the small ones, the bigger size tortilla. But if you switch it out for like a lower carb, higher fiber tortilla, which is around, for the same, it's a little bit smaller of a size, it's around 70 calories. So if you go from 110 to 70, that's one tactic to decrease your caloric intake, right? Another one, which is more of a strategy, would be like a keto diet or just low carb, right? Where your overall approach is to cut out a food group, which would be carbs, which would be like flour, rice, desserts, alcohol, fruits, rice, beans, tortillas, breads, pastas. You cut all that out, or you severely limit it, and you severely limit it, or you severely restrict it. So that's a different strategy. And now, tactic to do that could be like, okay, for breakfast, I'm just going to have eggs and bacon, and no rice or no bread or no anything like that, right? And so you're doing this to essentially restrict calories by restricting a certain food group, right? And so hopefully that explains a bit of a calorie deficit, which is eating less than your body requires. And inevitably, body fat is your body's form of storage, right? So here's a bit of an example. In order to lose fat, and understanding a little bit more from a conceptual perspective, fat, right? How the body uses it. Your body uses fat in a form to store energy, kind of like a savings account, right? And the main idea behind like fat is if you're eating more than your body requires regularly, your body will store fat. And if you are not eating within that much, your body will utilize your body's stores of fat. And so if you're in a caloric deficit and you're not eating enough to support that, and you want to lose excess body fat, you need to kind of force your body to utilize the fat by tapping into the savings, right? So it's kind of like, let's say your rent is $2,000 a month and you're only bringing in $500, but you have $10,000 saved in the bank, and you wanted to force yourself into using that. You have to be frugal with your calories. Same kind of idea when it comes to being in the red. When it comes to your finances, like you got to be kind of broke with your calories. Similar idea. And so, with the calorie deficit, there kind of comes two different approaches for mostly. People either have a moderate or a considerable deficit. A moderate one would be, it would inevitably mean that you would be losing half a pound to a pound a week of body fat. And for some people, and really most people, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so slow. It's going to take too long. It's going to take me 2 years to get me to my goal, right? Whereas if they put into MyFitnessPal, they want to lose 2 pounds a week, which would be a deficit of 1,000 calories a week. If your needs are a 2,000 and you're eating 1,000 calories a day, there's going to be a lot of repercussions to that. Okay, so that's kind of the next point that I really wanted to discuss: the repercussions of a slow fat loss journey and a moderate deficit, and the repercussions and consequences of a more aggressive and considerable deficit. Okay, so two different things. The size of your calorie deficit is going to determine how easy or how challenging your journey is going to be. And so if you've lost weight and you did it through a lot of exercise and severely restricting, that's a pretty considerable and aggressive approach. And now if you've done that and you've told yourself, oh my gosh, like this is kind of the only way that works for me because I have to do all this work, it's because you're leaning into a very considerable approach. It's aggressive. Sure, it works, but man, you're going to burn out. You're going to feel like shit. Your energy is going to be low. Your libido is going to be low. Your sleep's going to be pretty hampered. I've seen and heard women lose their periods because your body has to regulate itself and find energy from other places, right? And it's extremely stressful on the body. And imagine one way of your body trying to force you to eat a bit more is to increase your cravings, right? Whereas if you did it the other way, and another consequence of a considerable deficit is the likelihood of longevity, right? Let's just call it the likelihood of longevity and sustainability. Let me ask you this question. What's the likelihood of you keeping the weight off if you did a massive deficit, exercised 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week for months on end? What's the likelihood that that approach is sustainable? If you said high, that's a unique perspective. In my perspective, as a personal trainer and ex-gym owner, and I had a team, we've coached and trained over 1,500 people in my 10-year career, the likelihood is really low. Like, sure, in the beginning, maybe the first 6 to 12 weeks, you're like, look how much I've lost. And you're like, awesome. Like, well, what's the success rate of that? Not high. Now, let's talk a bit about the other side of the coin, which is a more moderate deficit, a slower approach, and less aggressive exercise. What are some consequences of that? Number one is you don't have to cut out severe foods at all to do this approach, right? Whatsoever. Number two is because you're not like banging your body up or have this aggressive approach, your body's response isn't going to be so aggressive. Your cravings aren't going to be so crazy. They're still going to be there. It's something that you're going to just have to learn to deal with. But if you have a lot on your plate, it's much easier to deal with going at it a little slower than much harder. Exercising for hours on end every day is going to be pretty hard to sustain versus like, okay, let's just walk for 10 minutes to 20 minutes a day to 30 minutes a day. Starting off slow and steady. It doesn't sound like the most attractive plan, but my idea is this. If you get in a rush to build your foundation, the likelihood of that foundation being sound and strong once you start building your house isn't really high. But if you take your time building your foundation, making sure it's right, making sure it's level, making sure everything is sound and strong and sound, everything is sound and strong and adequate. As you build your house, it's going to be leveled, right? Because you took the time, the extra time, to make sure that you're building this solid foundation, right? And so if you did that and you lost 1 pound a week for 52 weeks, that's 50 pounds a year, right? But if you're like, oh my gosh, I could lose 3 to 4 pounds a week for a year, that could be like 200 pounds in a year, you're probably going to be like the first 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, you'll lose a lot. You're going to burn out. You're going to binge. Then you're going to gain all the weight back. And then you're going to develop this crazy relationship with carbs and say, oh my gosh, I love carbs. And then you're going to eat it and feel good, but then you're going to feel guilty and feel bad and say, why did I do that to myself? Right? Like I've seen this time and time and time again. And so you got to ask yourself this. What is my real goal? Is my real goal to lose weight? is my real goal to lose weight and keep it off. And so the level of the deficit is going to determine the likelihood of sustainability. And that's kind of the main thing I wanted to discuss with you today, is that. And consider that. Am I saying that it's impossible to do an aggressive approach and be successful forever? No. But what I am saying is the likelihood of that isn't freaking high, especially if you have a lot on your plate. If you're married, if you have kids, if you work full time, if you're going to school, if you have a project, if your kids are in soccer practice or violin or piano or dance, you're asking for a lot. So what I want you to really just consider is the size of your deficit will determine how hard, how challenging this is going to be, or how easy. And here's the thing. If you said, man, it feels like I'm eating quite normal, I'm not suffering, like this is something I can do, I can keep up with, let's like, that's a really good mindset with this. So hopefully you enjoyed this talk. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Calorie deficit is the main mechanism, and how you do that will determine your success. Coach Brendan, Fitness and Nutrition Tips. Much love. I'm out. Peace.